Oathkeeper Militia, they've released a video claiming they have boots on the ground in Kentucky in Rowan County, ready to defend County Clerk Kim Davis from U.S. Marshals. Now, the group's director, Stewart Rhodes, released this video. It's an interaction with 3 other members about Davis's case. Take a listen.
I still think it's important that our presence be known there, because it's not an issue of marriage, it's not an issue of a lot of things that they're trying to make the issue. The issue is still that a judge took an elected official, a citizen of the United States, and detained them without cause, without paperwork, without due process.
Well, Nick, what we hear this group describing is a potential armed confrontation between law enforcement and militia over Davis. And that could be a big freaking deal, because we're talking about law-abiding, members of the legal community and members of law enforcement that are there legally. This group is a militia group that's very, how should we put this, rogue? And yet they have authority. They have boots on the ground. They're saying, if this judge decides to come back after her, we're going to do something about it. We're not going to let U.S. Marshals actually take her to jail. They're not going to let them. So what are they going to do? They're going to use their loaded automatic rifles, and they're going to shoot at the federal officers. I mean, this is just completely ridiculous. And can you imagine this picture? Imagine if they weren't, like middle-aged, buff white guys with cowboy hats and baseball hats. Imagine if it was a group of black people, for example, or maybe, let's say, Muslims with beards carrying those kinds of weapons. Do you understand, like, what kind of backlash that would have across the whole country? But the fact that it's these dudes, oh, it's fine, they can do whatever they want. They can walk around with whatever kind of guns they want. I mean, we saw them back in May at the Sugar Pine mine, right? When they were supposedly protecting that mine from the government because the government is evil and is trying to take over. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Well, Stuart Rhodes, the head of this organization, or militia, I should say, he stated, this judge needs to be put on notice that his behavior is not going to be acceptable, and we'll be there to stop it and intercede ourselves if we have to. He's making that very clear. He's not mincing words. So in other words, if Davis defies any court order and the judge orders U.S. Marshals to come after her, these guys are going to stand in their way. That's what he's saying. What are they going to do? How? Well, they're armed. So number one, shoot at officers. I mean, I don't know how they would do that other than to be armed and interact and stand up and say, no, you're not taking her. I mean, that's exactly what they're saying there. Right, and and just the fact that there's so much debate. There's so many people are up in arms over this one idiot, Kim Davis, who doesn't want to follow the rules just like these guys is in itself kind of a joke, isn't it, Margaret? Well, the Oath Keepers founder, Stewart Rhodes, just going back to him for a second, this is another quote that he had to say about John McCain this time. Just to give you some context of how he thinks. He said that John McCain should be tried for treason and hung by the neck until dead. He said that about John McCain, who is a sitting senator of the United States. Those are very difficult words to muddle. He's actually calling for the death of a U.S. senator right there. Right, and I mean, again, though, is that surprising, though, coming from a group like this? Not really, given that they're, almost anarchists. What's surprising, though, is that there's been no FBI intervention. There's been, like you said, if this were a different group, let's a radical Islamic group per se, this would not be allowed. But because this is an indigenous group, where people with very similar beliefs are in these states, and they're allowed to not only function, but potentially manipulate and push back law enforcement. A lot of these men, I want to point out, they are retired law enforcement. They're ex-military, paramilitary, or police officers. Well, they see a social shift in their communities, and they're standing up and saying no. But what happens though when you get copycatters, right? You get these people who are going to start their own damn militias now because they watch stuff like this, and these guys are cool. They have the earpieces and the dark shades, and they're walking around with their guns, and they say, "Hey, we want to do this crap too." And we're even dumber than these guys. Then what's going to happen? We have more than one of these kinds of groups, the Oath Keepers. Not only that, Nick, but we have sheriffs on the ground in Kentucky, actual practicing sheriffs with offices who identify with the Oath Keepers. One of them said in a phone call, this was the Jackson County, Kentucky Sheriff, Denny Payman. He was actually, coordinating with local Oath Keepers, those activists. Rhodes actually called him and told him that he was on his way to Kentucky. I mean, you've got local law enforcement cooperating with a group. Yeah, and that's the saddest part, isn't it? We'd love to know what you think at home about the Oath Keepers, about their vow to protect Kim Davis from U.S. Marshals. Should this rogue judge just decide that he was going to throw her back in jail for any reason? These guys are on the case. Let us know what you think about this story. While you're at it, be sure to check out the rest of our channel and subscribe to the Lip TV for more.